You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
Good morning. You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I am Rich Cabaceres, coming to you live in your ears on Wednesday after a day off yesterday. You don't want to know what happened. It wasn't that exciting, but we had Wayne step in for me, and he talked about and continued the conversation about school shootings. And you know what? We're not going to talk about that today. I'm sure it's going to bleed in a little bit, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're changing the topic, and we got to get back to it at some point in time because it is so important. But let's talk about some of the things that have happened since this school shooting. And one of those being the fact that 13 Russians were indicted for fraud. Think about this. 13 Russians were indicted for fraud. And basically what they did is they created a troll farm. And if you don't know what a troll farm is, or what a troll is, basically that's somebody who sits on the internet in an anonymous manner and picks on people and disseminates fake information and does all kinds of stuff because they're trying to get a point across, or they're just trying to stir up the pot. So 13 Russians were indicted for doing that, and some of the things that this troll farm did, which basically it was a big building that had a bunch of people in it that was disseminating false information. Let's see some of the things that they did. Alright, so first, they created this fake sex tape between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Second, they created this fake video of an American soldier shooting the Quran. Third, they made this post about a phony shooting in Atlanta, Georgia. They talked about they had this guy called Williams who got on and said he was African American, and you could hear it in his accent, and he said any businessman can't be racist, advocating for Donald Trump. And one of the other things that they did was they actually caused this movement of this group from Texas fighting for their independence from the United States. So really they were causing civil unrest all across the board. The question is, did they actually have an impact on the election? And what's happening right now is politicians are saying there was no clear evidence that this had an impact. There was no measurable impact on this election. But I think this kind of goes to the wider idea of why people believe something when they see it on the internet. And it is ultimately when they see it on the internet, they believe it sometimes. And there's no clearer indication of that than people who, when they see something on YouTube that confirms some of their fears, they believe it. They say, oh, well, that must be true because it goes along with some of the things that I actually believe, as opposed to having apparently I can't speak today. That must be one of the things. Substantive. Yes, there we go. There's the word. So, substantive facts. So, yeah, really, when you look at it, why do people feel this way? Why do people have to go on the internet and find somebody who agrees with their opinions? And is it okay to have an opinion even though it is completely false and it's based on untruths? And let's use an example of that. One example of that is there are people, because of YouTube videos and Facebook pages, who believe that the world is flat. They're saying that NASA has created this conspiracy that the world has been flat the entire time, and every single astronaut, every single book that you've read, everything is showing that the world is flat. So, do you think the world is flat? And you know what? If you go to Google right now, and you do a Google search for "the world is flat," videos upon videos, they have conferences. And people all go and they talk about how the world is flat. If that's not confirmation bias, I don't know what is. Everybody gets in the same room and they talk about how they believe the same thing, that the world is flat. I thought we got beyond this, but if people are willing to believe that the world is flat, and there's been this conspiracy from everybody in the world that the world is not round, it's flat, and it's been going on for centuries, then what else are you willing to believe? Are you willing to believe some guy who has a thick accent saying Trump isn't racist? Are you willing to believe that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton created a sex tape? Because, really, that's what ends up happening. People see something on Facebook and they believe it. People see something on YouTube and they believe it. And if it looks like it's a credible source, then they take it to the grave with them. And this is one of the reasons why conspiracy theories continue to grow. But this isn't going to be a show about conspiracy theories, because we're probably going to talk about that tomorrow. This is going to be talking about the direct impact that 13 Russians made by pushing this propaganda, pushing this fraud on the American people. And as opposed to talking about the impact on Donald Trump and Donald Trump talking about how it immediately impacts him, we should be talking about how Russia is using policy that could create civil unrest in the United States. And why is nobody talking about that? And we're going to continue the conversation, because let's start talking about the American mentality about what we see on the internet and why we instantly want to believe what we see. And, you know, it's funny because I think that this kind of turns into a conversation of why is it that we naturally want to find things that agree with what we believe, as opposed to do some unbiased research and prove ourselves wrong. And I think part of it is the psyche of the human being, which is you feel better when you're proven right as opposed to proven wrong. But we have to realize that you can't make up your own facts, right? We see politicians do this on a daily basis. We see it in the city of Fall River. We see it in the state of Massachusetts. We see it at the federal level. We see it throughout all kinds of counties throughout the entire country. We see it, and you know what? The reason why I'm stating the city of Fall River is because they're notorious. The administration is notorious for making up their own facts. So, really, politicians love to make up their own facts. And then what happens is people naturally just believe them because they like them, or because of the fact that they believe in what that person says, as opposed to doing the actual research and figuring out if it is a fact. So this is scary when you really think about what the long-term impact of people who believe whatever's said to them that they agree with, as opposed to finding facts. Because if that continues to happen, we'll have chimpanzees running the United States of America. That happens in local elections right now. We have people who are horrible for the municipalities that they serve, and they get elected to office simply because of the fact that they're saying things that people believe that could be completely wrong. Right? And there's actually one thing that's happening in my city right now that is a completely false statement. There's one guy, and I've talked about him a lot on the air, Steve Camara, who's probably the worst elected official I've ever seen in my life. Steve Camara, because of the fact that his street abuts a main road, and that main road is one way, he wants to make it two-way so he has the ability to get to his house a lot easier. And he's saying, whoa, major municipalities around, and this is my impression of him, major municipalities around the country want to make roads two ways because it's better for commerce. And really, that's not the case at all. Go to a city, go to a major city around this country, and tell me how many of their main roads that have a lot of businesses lined up around them have two-way roads. The argument is nonsense. And there's a lot of these arguments that you hear come across in politics that are based on nothing but opinion, right? There's multiple cases of this, whether guns are good, whether guns are bad. A lot of times, it's based on an opinion, right? Monday we talked about that, and I said the reason why guns are around in the United States and they were written into the Constitution is because they are also part of our public safety. They are also part of protecting us from a foreign invader. And then somebody called in a show after mine and said, hey, the odds of America being invaded by another country in the 21st century is highly unlikely. But you know what's funny about that? It shows the ignorance of America. And here's why it shows the ignorance of America. Because really, when you think about it, how many times has America come close, or times that we don't even know about, from being invaded by another country. And you could take a look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? If we didn't have guns as American citizens, countries would be more willing to come over here because they could easily and strategically plan out how they're going to take over military posts and how they're going to fight these battles with our military. But if they're going through a city street and they don't know if everybody on the entire street has guns, how are they going to fight that battle? Because even after a nuclear bomb hits, you're still going to have to protect yourself, whoever lives. So really, you have these arguments that are based on nothing more than opinion and nothing more than ignorance. So really, to dive back into the Russian thing, now you had 13 Russians who colluded and committed this fraud of creating fake information and throwing it out there on the internet. Now, all this information was believed by some people because they wanted to believe it, because they didn't like Donald Trump, they didn't like Hillary Clinton, they didn't like something. They wanted to secede from the Union in Texas because they don't like the way that the American government operates. And unfortunately, instead of Donald Trump going after Russia and saying, I can't believe Russia is letting this happen, instead, what he did is he talked about himself. The President of the United States, instead of talking about a country who, in my opinion, created this hostility against the United States of America, instead what he does is he goes and he says, there is no evidence that it was unable to change the election. He's talking about himself, saying there wasn't collusion because this happened before my election. This happened in 2014. So, Donald Trump, here's a statement to you. You're listening right now. Here's a statement to you, Donald Trump. Guess what? You're the President of the United States, but everything isn't about you, Donald Trump. You're supposed to represent the people of the United States. So you should be letting all these things that people say, these pundits that these pundits say, the things that people say, the trolls, you should let it roll right off your shoulder. And what you should be doing is you should be focusing on being the leader that the American people need, because America is getting worse. You said so in your election. You said you want to make America great again. But you know the only person who I see getting great at this point in time? It's you, Donald Trump. It's you. And why? Because instead of taking this opportunity to talk about how Russian meddling in anything is not okay, you use the opportunity to talk about yourself. You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. You can call it and join the conversation, 508-673-1480. And before we go to the break, I want to pose this question to you. Why do you think that people believe what they see on Facebook? Why do you think that people believe what they see on YouTube? And why do you think that people grab these things as opposed to turning it into an opportunity to do research and prove it right or wrong? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Well, good morning.
How you doing today?
Hey, I'm okay.
That's great.
No takers on the Russians?
So here you go. Here's your opportunity. What say you?
What say me? I always heard that it was George Soros. Paid for a lot of stuff.
And you know, it's funny because everybody was pointing the finger at everybody else when really there was Russian fraud. Russia was actively trying to manipulate the election. And granted, they're pointing to the fact that it was obviously so fake that people couldn't believe it. But here's the issue. Some people believed it. Some people thought it was all true. And really, if you want to point to something that is an indication that people are willing to believe anything, look at the argument that the world is flat. I'm telling you, Google it.
Listen, I got to give you credit, man, because most talk hosts are saying, "Hey, what did Obama do about the Russians?"
Right. And you know what? We here at WSAR try to bring a different twist, especially here on Brain Drain. I try to bring a different twist to some of these conversations because I think it's important. But really, people in the world right now, mostly Americans, believe that the world is flat. Some people do. And they gather all in the same room and they wear these tinfoil hats. It's crazy.
These are the people that want me to show my license and maybe show my birth certificate when I go vote.
Right. It's crazy, and I think that it happens on both sides. I think that these world is flat people aren't Republican. I don't think they're Democrat. I don't think they're conservative. I don't think they're liberal. I think that they're somewhere in the middle, and they represent all these different things. But if people are willing to believe that the world is flat, are they willing to believe that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton had a sex tape?
Yeah, they probably do. It wasn't Hillary messing around with the Wiener's wife.
Well, and that's an argument too, right? It's Huma. What was it?
I can't.
The argument is that she was messing around with her. But again, that goes to show you that who knows if it's true. Somebody is just throwing that out there to see if it actually sticks. And people do that on a regular basis. They do that in local elections. They throw information out there from fake accounts, and if it sticks, then they run with it. And if it doesn't stick, they stop talking about it.
Amazing.
It's amazing because social media, instead of making people brighter, I think it's making people dumber.
It's war in the mind.
It's crazy. And you know what? If you believe that the world is flat, please, 508-673-1480, call in, join the conversation. Tell me why you think the world is flat. I really, really want to know this because this has had...
The known is, too, they're going to take all... If you hear them, it's all about guns. Guns. They use they put the S in.
And if you're listening right now and you think I'm nuts that people don't believe the world is flat, Google it. Go to YouTube and type "the world is flat," and there are videos and videos and videos about this. I can't make this up. There are videos. There's message boards. People believe that the world is flat, or some people
believe they're going to take all your guns away.
And you know what? So
when the Second Amendment tells you that you got to go for training lessons, that's what the Second Amendment says. It also says that you got to have a card to carry around with you.
So here's the thing.
It's pathetic at times. But
here's the thing with the Second Amendment.
Go ahead.
I believe that the Second Amendment makes sure that Americans can stay free because it allows us to protect ourselves.
I agree.
That being said, the fact that the children
from the rules and regulations that come with it, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, of course, and you can lose that right, but from doing something stupid.
Absolutely.
You can lose, and I think you should lose that right if you have a mental disorder. You should have to do a mental status check, but you should also do a background check as well. But the right is yours to lose as opposed to yours to gain. Now, that being said, the gun argument, I can't believe that these kids from Parkland, Florida, are being trucked around and going to Washington, D.C.
They're being brainwashed, right? That's what they said, too, yesterday. I heard that one.
I can't believe this.
The one that had leukemia, she's being brainwashed.
It hasn't even been a week, and these kids are being used as political pawns to argue a point.
I think these kids got their own opinions.
I agree. And you know what? If they're going there and expressing their opinions, that's great. But how can you justify a large group of these kids going to Washington, D.C. to fight for gun rights a week after? It hasn't even been a week after. They're being used as political pawns, and I've seen this kind of thing before. When something happens to kids, they get these kids and use them as political pawns to fight one side of the argument, as opposed to having a discussion on where we can meet in the middle.
That's true. All right, sir.
Hey, thank you so much.
Have a good day.
You too. And you know what? When you get off the phone, while you're listening to Brain Drain, Google, "Is the world flat?" And you will be surprised. Some of the quote-unquote science
behind it.
I wouldn't
be a club.
I wouldn't even call it a club.
We could have an initiation fee.
I wouldn't be surprised if they continue this Russian investigation and they find out that those Russians were the people who actually perpetrated the world is flat.
You got to show your license, and next it'll be your birth certificate.
Yeah.
Go vote.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's crazy because right now.
And they don't believe it because it's Barack Obama's fault.
Well, it's funny because
it's easy to point to him.
Well, and that's the thing. As opposed to just saying, hey, it's going to be one side or we're going to look at everything down the middle, people like to point the finger as a person being part of the problem, right? Donald Trump isn't the reason why all your problems exist. Barack Obama is not the reason why all your problems exist.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. If you like one person so much so that you're willing to criticize another person, then you really should do a self-inventory and start really evaluating what it is that makes you tick. Because we should be focusing on people's policies as opposed to the person themselves. And I know I talk a lot of times about Steve Kamara and how he's slimy, but I'm basing that on his policies and not how I feel about him personally.
Okay.
He's slimy in general. When you look at his policies, he'll argue both sides of an argument and vote. Or he got reelected on arguing for the rail trail and was the only person to vote against it. So, yeah, so, these are the kind of politicians that we need to avoid, but that's based on policy and not based on the way that I feel about how he looks, the way I feel about his age, his sex, his race, anything. I think that's what we need to do when we make judgments. So, hey,
Okay.
thank you so much for your call.
All right. You take care.
You too. So, yeah, again, if you think the world is flat, 508-673-1480, call in. Really, call in. So, back to these Russians. 13 Russians were indicted. 13. And they were indicted for fraud. They were indicted for saying things like starting groups about Texas independence from the United States. And they had this one guy, Williams, who was going around in a thick accent or on Facebook and YouTube and saying any businessman can't be racist because they were arguing for Donald Trump. But they were doing the opposite, too. When Donald Trump got elected, they staged rallies for Donald Trump and against Donald Trump. So really, their entire motive was to create civil unrest. And if we don't look at this as Americans as an act from Russia of potential war, then I don't know what it is, because what we should be doing, because trying to push this propaganda in the United States is something that people use in war. They push propaganda to get the people to slowly turn over to their side, and we now know that Russia is pushing propaganda in the United States. Which says to me that if we continue to allow this to happen, then we are not protecting our nation. And that's what Donald Trump should be talking about, is how come his boy Vladimir Putin is not going after these Russians and throwing them in a prison? Why are they not doing that? Why has Vladimir Putin not openly come out against these folks yet? And maybe he will. But if I'm looking at this, I'm saying there's no way that this happened without Russia's knowledge. There's no way that this happened at all without Russia's knowledge. And I think that's a concern, because if we're talking about the safety of our nation, we have to consider that other people are looking towards creating the United States' demise. And there's no clearer indication of that than this Russian fraud about meddling in elections and creating civil unrest. So, really, you should be asking yourselves, why does Russia, why are they in the interest of creating this civil unrest? Are they trying to overthrow our government? Are they trying to get us to overthrow our government so that way if we're in a case of civil unrest, they can easily swoop in and take care of us? Are they trying to ruin our economy indirectly by feinting one way and then going another way? Because ultimately, we have to realize at this point in time that Russia is not our friend. And regardless of the business deals that you have with them, Russia is not our friend in this case. And if they came out adamantly against this, then that'd be one thing. But this is 13 Russians who had a company who they had a troll farm. And they were openly going out and creating this civil unrest. But who's to blame more so? Is it Russia? Or is it the Americans who actually believe the propaganda that Russia was putting out there? Is it the Americans who, as opposed to going the extra step and doing the research to prove whether the opinion on Facebook or YouTube is right or wrong, instead what they do is they go and they believe it and they start preaching it to their friends. And then they create this group of people who all they're operating on is some falsehood. Should we as Americans be looking at all the information that I say to you, that everybody says to you, and turn around and do research and gather our own opinions, or just adopt opinions of the people who are out there? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
So good morning.
How you doing today?
All right. I think these 19 Russians, whatever, their basic purpose was to create chaos, not so much to favor one side or the other. But in 2006, a book came out about Ronald Reagan and all of that, and then like his basically the Cold War and how he got the Soviet Union to collapse through the economy and the ramp up of weapons productions and all that stuff. But in it was this memo that came from, at the time, it was in 1983, the memo was created. And it was at the time the memo was to Yuri Andropov, which was the guy that was preceding, what's his face there, Mikhail Gorbachev, right? And his director of the KGB was Cherbakov, and that's who the memo came from. It was about Ted Kennedy soliciting the Russian government to undermine the election of 1984, right?
Okay.
And the Russians both, Kennedy and the Russians both acknowledged in the memo that Reaganomics was actually working, doing what it was supposed to do. One, recovering our economy, and two, putting us way ahead of anything Russia was doing economically.
There's no fact that trickle-down economics actually worked. That's actually false.
7% growth. I mean, that's part of, some evidence. It may not be a direct line, but 7% growth generated under Ronald Reagan is pretty good.
Usually, the reason why growth happens during one administration is because the predecessor administration passed policy that helped the economy grow.
The malaise of Jimmy Carter was responsible for Reaganomics. Reagan turned around the economy. That's what you're saying.
Well, usually,
so I think there are a lot of economists that would disagree with you. But the
so if you let me respond, one of the things that actually happens is usually the economy happens on its own and moves on its own without the impact of presidents. And if the president does something stupid, then it actually hits the economy a little bit. But usually, kind of corporations operate independently of their own, and the economy grows
they look
or shrinks
at,
based on
what the policies or what they can, because they want to be able to predict the future, which is impossible. But what they do is they look at the policies of the president, and then they base their decisions on what they think is going to happen.
But if that were the case, then things like
their decisions right now on what they think Trump is going to do.
If that were the case, then Obamacare would have
8 years ago on what they thought Obama was going to do, which is why he never achieved 3% growth at any point during his entire presidency.
If that were the case, then
that is the case.
No. If that were you're right. That is the case. That 3% wasn't achieved. But if that were the case, then under Obamacare, the healthcare industry would have shrunk to the point where it would have been non-existent. And that's what people were saying. Oh, because of this Obama. You got to let me finish my points, because you know what? I'm trying to let you finish your points, but you got to let me finish my points. So that being said, one of the things is, during Obamacare, people in the market, and I know because I was in it, people were talking about how this is not going to help the healthcare sector. It's going to actually shrink the healthcare sector. And you know what? The economy got better after 2008. So in my opinion, the president has a minor effect on the economy, but unless he decides to blow up the Federal Reserve, or unless he decides to blow up...
I mean, the whole point was the basically the Russian collusion that took place under, with Ted Kennedy and the Russian government. But even with their criteria, indictments, the criteria that Mueller put forth, when is Steele going to get indicted? When is Fusion GPS going to get indicted?
See, now this is part of the problem.
When is the DNC going to get indicted?
I appreciate your call. I appreciate your opinions, but this is part of the problem. We point to one side of the argument as opposed to just talking about the information that's on the table.
If you're going to apply the standard, apply it equally. That's all I'm
I
saying.
agree. I agree with you 100%. But why are you not talking about the negatives that the opposite side is doing? We should be talking about the negatives across the board as opposed to pointing to these folks, because you're right. Steele probably will get indicted at some point in time because of what he did to manipulate this. And I think at some point in time, all this stuff is going to come out. But to start pointing and saying...
The funny thing is, in that indictment, they cited, deleting emails. These 19 Russians, right? Deleted emails. Who else do we know deleted some emails? Maybe 30,000 or so.
Right, but people delete emails
Where's the indictment?
people delete emails on a regular basis. You know what? Right now in the city of Fall River,
Not
there's an
ones
argument.
that are under subpoena
All right.
by the FBI.
You got to let me finish my points. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. So, I want to have a conversation with you. I want to be able to have a conversation, but unfortunately, if you keep on talking over me, we can't have that conversation. So please, let's have a conversation back and forth. Now, again, in the city of Fall River, right now, they are trying to bring these emails out in court, and there are people standing in the way from getting emails about an argument between the Fall River Office of Economic Development and the city of Fall River, which sounds really, really weird, but we can dive into it a little bit more. You're live on legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Good morning, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Hey, I don't call you too often, but I got to chime in on this one.
Sure.
Mr. Constitutionalist gets the one-sided of it all, and I hate to call but I do criticize him at times because, the last administration. You got to understand this. I'm not a cheerleading rah-rah for the last either. I mean, there was mistakes made, but guess what? We went through a recession.
Right.
Half of Obama's administration time was trying to build the economy back up.
Right.
I think the last 2 years, I want to say the last couple of years, we started to come on strong, maybe. And of course, when he left, it was already in the makings of the future stocks that were already rolling. That were going to start looking good for 2017 into 18. And I'm not trying to downplay this with this administration, but it was already going into the process of rolling into a good economy.
And to that point, majority of the time, presidents of the United States don't control the economy that they're currently in unless they implement some drastic change. And there's no clearer indication of that than Barack Obama. Barack Obama was coming in right after a recession, and the market had to go up. There was only one way to go, and it was up.
Well, people have short memories, Rich, because when you try to put things on the bill, there was a lot of gridlock, and I think people have short memories of this. There was a lot of gridlock back in the day, and when he tried to put a job bill on the table, they threw it off. When he tried to put the immigration bill on the table, they ended up dismissing it.
Actually, the immigration bill
he put on the table that didn't get done, and he had to do it sometimes with an executive order, in that degree.
And the immigration bill that you pointed out was actually a bipartisan effort led up by none other than John McCain and Marco Rubio. And on the Democratic side, you had people like Barack Obama and some of the more moderate people. You know who actually threw it down were the extreme conservatives and the extreme liberals in Congress.
Right.
And Senate.
And I'm not. And again, it's like I understand you want to make it a two-sided. You want to make it a balance, a conversation. But I know that we're not living in that utopia world anymore. We're living in a very divided because we have short memories.
Now, shouldn't we be fighting for that?
When I call different shows on once in a while, I say why do people have such short memories? Why don't you look up and do your homework and look up what happened in 2010, what happened in 2012, or whatever, with the second term of Barack Obama. There was things that went on that we just have short memories about, that we forget what happened and what didn't happen.
I think you're on point 100%, and I think the utopia that I'm trying to get both groups to start working together, I think it starts with the American people. I think if we stop pointing at sides and we start figuring out how people can work together, then guess what? We can create the utopia that I'm talking about. Thank you so much for your call. And thank you so much for bringing up the fact that people sometimes forget some of the information that led up to what's happening right now. I appreciate your call. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you? Hello.
Yeah.
How you doing today? Hello. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Okay, brother. This is Dennis from Nick's Hot Dog.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, well, terrible actually, but I'm alive.
All right.
I just want to. I know I'm off the subject, but we talked last Friday, and you were going to set something up or try to.
Yeah,
I didn't hear
yeah.
from you
So
yesterday. I don't know how that's
yeah,
going.
you know, I was actually out sick yesterday, so
Okay.
so
buddy.
actually, you were one of the first people I was going to be reaching out to today, so we could actually talk about. And Dennis, just for a quick update before we actually, before you actually come on here, we talked about at Nick's Hot Dogs on 534 South Main Street.
Yes.
While I was there Friday from 11 to 12, we talked about how your son is doing, and it's just a reminder to everybody who's listening. His son is the person who became paralyzed because of a swimming accident and now is homeless, sleeping on a couch on the 3rd floor, but doesn't have the ability to go down those stairs. So he has to be carried down the stairs, has bed sores. How's everything going?
Oh, it's tough, very, very bad. Just the neglect.
You there? Yeah.
From not getting him a place and the abuse of his illness and it's caused by him not being in the right facility, in the right place.
So I'd actually love to, and this is what we talked about on Friday, I'd love to kind of talk about healthcare and how we treat our disabled and how we treat our elderly, and I'd actually love for you to come on and talk about that with me someday.
Okay.
It doesn't look like it's going to be able to happen this week, but I definitely want to talk to you about it more so, because it is a shame that your son is still homeless, 19 years old, paralyzed, and can't get access to housing. Yet people are being put, it sounds like people are being placed before him, and nobody's doing anything about this. And you've reached out to numerous people, right?
Numerous people, the whole city, from the city hall, 6th floor, to everyone. Yes, I have.
And that's the thing. People, if you're listening right now, you're saying, oh, why don't they call this person? Why don't they call that person? These people have already been reached. All of them have been reached, and nobody's doing anything about this.
No one. No call, decency of a call back from housing, from the 6th floor. Not going to say names. I've been everywhere, meetings, everything for my son.
Now, we are going into the news break, but I do want people to think about this as we go into the news break, because we're starting hour 2. But you have been disserviced. Your son has been disserviced by our area and potentially our nation. So thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
You're welcome, sir. Bye-bye.
So yes, we are talking about the 13 Russians who were indicted, and why is it that people believe whatever is on Facebook, whatever is on Twitter, whatever is on YouTube? Because this Russian troll farm, the people who were indicted for fraud, this act of, in my opinion, war on the United States from Russia, they talked about sex tape. They created a sex tape between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Obviously fake, but they put it out there, and people believed it. They showed a video of a soldier shooting the Quran, and this soldier didn't even look like he was in the proper uniform. It was an American soldier in a uniform that was really messed up. Didn't even look like he was in the American Army or the American military. And a video of him shooting the Quran, and he was just a bartender somewhere. So they paid him a couple of bucks to go shoot this video. They posted this article about a phony shooting in Atlanta, Georgia. I almost said Atlanta, California. Yeah, it's been one of those days. But they also posted this thing that people were actually running on: Texas seceding from the United States. People actually believed it, and people went along with it. And you still tell them this day, oh yeah, no, that wasn't perpetrated by Russians. We actually, as Texans, and we didn't even talk to anybody from Russia. It's crazy. It's crazy that people actually grasped this stuff, and really all they did is they preyed on American ignorance, and people believe it. And the big example that I used is there are Americans that believe that the world is flat, and they're coming up with all this documentation on why they think the world is flat. And I've seen videos of people spinning a ball and watching the water float off the ball, because gravity must not exist if you spin the ball fast enough and water doesn't stick to it. I've seen people talk about how the sun moves around the Earth because the sun is... we have a geocentric solar system. And the stars... I don't even know the justification for that. I've actually tried kind of looking at it in an unbiased manner, but it's just ridiculous. People in the United States, some of them believe that the world is flat. How does that make you feel? That people believe whatever they see on YouTube. And it's unfortunate because as opposed to teaching people how to actually research in schools, we're teaching them how to take tests. We're teaching kids how to take a test as opposed to do their own critical thinking, do their own research. And this is the cause. This is the long-term cause. There are people who believe the world is flat because somebody told them that, and because they thought the argument was convincing enough, it must be true. How about you go and do your own research? But people aren't even taught how to do that. Because when you do your own research, the first thing you have to do is state your opinion clearly and say, this is my opinion right now. I have to understand that that's my opinion, so that way I don't only find things that support my opinion. So then you put your opinion aside, and then you find as many documents that you possibly can about the opinion and figure out if it's coming from a slant or if it's coming from an unbiased nature. Then when you have all that documentation in front of you and you realize that you have this skew and you try not to lean towards that way, you come up with a conclusion at some point in time. But really, when you get into it, is that what people are doing? Is that what schools are teaching kids how to do? Because they're not. I can't even tell you why it is that people. Well, I know why people are being taught to just take a test. It's because they have to pass a test in order to get a diploma. But right now, it's very difficult, based on time, for a teacher to teach a child how to do research. And the long-term effect of that, people believe that the world is flat. People believe that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton had a sex tape. People believe that a soldier who was clearly not dressed properly shot a Quran. People believe that there was this phony shooting in Atlanta, Georgia. So the first thing whenever you see something on the internet and it appears to be a news clip, you might want to go and see if that is on other sources. You might want to go and check it out. Also, something else to consider. When you see something on the internet and there's many sources all saying the same thing, you might want to see the counter argument. You might want to see where they're getting their information from. Because a lot of times, politicians are doing nothing more than guessing. So if the information is coming from a politician, it's probably not based in fact. It's probably based in their opinion. And if you ask where their opinion is coming from, it's probably coming from their own mind. And it's really just, oh, well, my mind thinks this, so therefore it must be true. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I agree with what you have just said, but my concern is the gentleman that just called with the paralyzed son.
Yes.
Having worked as a visiting nurse for many, many years, not in this area, but Norfolk County, he needs to talk to the doctor, and I would even recommend connecting with King Philip Elder Service. It's not just for elderly. What bothered me was when he said he has precious souls. Those can lead to blood poisoning. He's got to do something with that young man.
And here's the issue. The issue is they've reached out to, I know for a fact, state politicians, city politicians. They've reached out to various organizations, and they are getting, oh, well, you know what, we'll be, right now they're lined up to potentially be somewhere at the beginning of March, but even that looks like it may not happen. So it's scary.
I think if he starts with a visiting nurse agency and the doctor, and maybe not focus right now on housing, because my thinking is that man needs medical attention.
Well, and he does have nursing. They actually go and they. So he has a bed right now, but he's homeless. He doesn't have a place to stay.
I understand. Yeah.
He's staying on a friend's couch. They don't even have room for him.
No, can't do. Oh boy.
Right. This is part of the problem. He doesn't have anywhere to actually stay. The problem is a lot more complicated than a visiting nurse because that would mean that he'd have a place to stay already.
Would he consider long-term placement? I'm talking about a nursing home at this point. I'm very serious.
They're looking for anything at this point, just to be able to get him off the streets.
Well, yeah. So is the father caring for this young man?
Yes, but the father doesn't have the ability to be able to take him in. So he's actually one of the caretakers.
Okay.
And we're going to have him in,
right.
so that way you'll be able to ask some of these questions yourself. But
okay.
Talk about the system. Tell me that there isn't a clearer indication that the system is failing than this situation in and of itself.
I know the system failed. I'm very well aware of that. I've been out of the field for maybe 15, 18 years, but I had problems even years ago with people who were dealing with with difficult situations and could not find housing. I agree. Okay, I wasn't sure, but when he said bed sores, they raised a red flag.
Right.
But as long as he does, there is. Okay, I understand, Richard. Do you know when he'll be in? Because I'll make a point to listen and call.
I'm looking to have him in next week. He was supposed to be in on Tuesday, except for the fact that I unfortunately wasn't able to come in on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
all right.
so it looks like it's going to be next week. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
Have a great day. You're live on legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Regarding this indictment,
Sure.
the 13 Russian nationalists.
Yep.
You know, that's an act of futile. It's futile. They're never going to be step foot in the United States, so those warrants will never be served.
Right.
And I just think it's ironic that news came out on Friday, when it also came out that the FBI was negligent on following up on a lead regarding the shooter in Florida.
So I'll be honest with you. I think that the FBI following up on the lead about the shooter, I think that they're both trying to draw attention away from potentially this act of war against the United States.
Well, historically, we're not saints when it comes to rigging elections. We've done it in the past. Vietnam is a prime example.
It doesn't make it okay.
No, I didn't say it made it okay.
Right.
But now that it's happened to us, we seem to think that, you know, we're not virgin in this area, okay? Let's face it.
I think you're right. And
you know, the Russians, I'm not a big fan of Russians for my own reasons. They were active in Vietnam, and people don't believe that.
But if there's any clear indication that we should sever ties with Russia because they may not be looking out for American interests, it's this. Right?
Well, you know, I don't. It's ancient history to some people, and I've said it before. Patton wasn't wrong. Patton was not wrong.
Right.
But he wasn't a politician. He was an officer. He was a soldier.
And when you look at it, we've talked about this. You and I have both talked about this. Who actually won World War II? It was Russia.
Yep.
But and you know, America and England, we were involved. But look at how many lives were lost in Russia in order to win this world war.
Oh yeah, and actually they came out ahead because they came out with all the territory.
Right. But you know, when you look at it, you can't point any other way than this is an act of war against the United States. And I honestly believe that they're using this school shooting to cover that up.
Yes, you're right. Okay, I'll let you go.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Bye.
And you know what? That's exactly what you alluded to. Why did they wait till Friday to come out with this? Because the school shooting happened, and they figured people wouldn't pay attention to this because the school shooting was something that happened on your own shores. But if you allow another government to come in and push propaganda and, you know what, rig elections, whether it was measurable or immeasurable, rig elections potentially, you are doing a disservice to the people that you represent, Mr. President. You should be going after Russia, and you should be going after them hard. On there, we're going to go right back to the lines. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing unbelievable. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. You know, I want to make one point here about these 13 Russians, or 19 now, I think it is. But remember one thing. These people's lives have been changed forever. And I'm going to tell you why. Because maybe Putin won't send them to the United States. That's not going to happen. But our allies and the people that we work with in this country, if they step foot in any other country that we associate with and good terms with, they're going to be picked up.
They have no reason to leave. And
that's what I'm saying. Their lives have changed forever, where they can go now. Okay?
Look at Ed Snowden. Ed Snowden went to Russia, and he got asylum.
Right. Well, so what my point, like I'm saying, is that where are they going to go? You know what I'm saying? That they can't go to different countries that are our allies because they'll get arrested there. Mm-hmm. You know, so their lives have changed forever.
So here's a thought: and majority of people in the United States never leave the United States in their entire lives. And a lot of people who do leave the United States only leave once or twice. So maybe the same thing can be said about Russia, where they might not want to leave.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think people like that, they do venture out because of their, what they do. You know what I'm saying? They have to go to other countries and do other things.
But
they don't travel like the average person. They travel much more.
And to your point, you're right. Now they can't travel freely throughout the entire world. Their lives are changed forever.
Yes, you know, and that's my feeling on that. So, and this thing about, well, you know, we've done it to them, and we've done it to other countries. The point of that, in my view, is that we are looking at people in this country, Americans, that's worked with them, okay, that's gave them the resources and different things to do what they did, okay, and we've had these people that's pleaded guilty already, you know, Flynn, and we got a Manafort, and we got a Gates, and we got a Page, and all of these people, okay, and it's working right up to the president, okay. Let Mueller do his investigation, okay. This is only a piss hole in the snow. Excuse my language. As far as what they turned up, Mueller's got much more that's going to be coming out of this, okay. But you know, the other thing is that it's really disturbing what's going on in this country. I mean, there's so much ignorance. People picking sides. Let them do their job. I mean, we got to put the trust in these people. Okay, we lose the FBI, the CIA, the news media. That's the resources that the people have to get information and the truth.
Except for the fact that the news media.
That we got to recognize the wrong that they're doing, but we can't destroy those agencies.
So what needs to happen now that everybody has the internet? What needs to happen is we need to throw away this idea that cable news is going to give you the unadulterated facts. And what we need to do is we need to start going and finding that information on our own, not just the information that we want to hear, but the information that is the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts. That's part of the problem. People don't want to hear things that they don't like because the truth hurts sometimes. But you know what? We need the truth now more than ever.
Yeah, and you know something? I had a person say on a radio station, he said, what do we do? What do we do? And that's not the question. The question is, what have we done?
Thank you so much for your call.
What have we done?
Have a great day. Thank you for your points. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
How are you, Rick?
How you doing?
Good.
Good to hear.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
I don't know if it's been covered before, but I'm calling because of I believe that the two standards in this country, the biggest standard that I see is the propaganda in the press.
Agreed.
They didn't like Donald Trump from the beginning. They never thought he was going to get elected. And all it is negative, negative, negative. And that's the major networks, the newspapers. And after you hear a certain thing for so long, there's people here that don't follow it that close. They stop believing it. They believe it.
So I think that the propaganda goes both ways.
Over a year, we've heard, you know as well as I do, Russia, Trump, collusion, collusion, collusion. Well, it seems like it's being reversed, and they don't like it at all. And there's a lot of figureheads that have been appointed or whatever that are in on this whole story.
And it's funny because I think that the media works both ways. I think that ultimately they're pushing propaganda on both sides, and I'd say it's MSNBC.
Rick,
hold on.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but I've followed this closely. For over a year, it's been Trump and Russia. Trump and Russia. Now it's coming about that they're finding out it's Clinton and the Democratic Party in Russia.
But this indictment isn't pointing to the Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. It's pointing towards they were just trying to create civil unrest on both sides.
Who do you think appointed Mueller?
Okay, but at the end of the day, what ends up happening is somebody needs to be able to investigate this entire investigation.
You got that right.
And here's the funny thing about this. Both folks are getting investigated. Hillary Clinton is being investigated for Russia collusion, and so is Donald Trump. The issue is depending on what side of the media you're watching, they're only talking about one side, and they're pointing the fingers at the other side. But in actuality, what's happening is this unbiased investigation. The media is making it something that's outlandish, and it's not being helped by our politicians at all. And it's not being helped.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. But the way it's going now, it's getting deeper and deeper, and you're starting to find out that people that have already testified, like John Brennan and Rubenstein, and some of the heads of the FBI and the CIA are all knew about it, all getting visa subpoenas or warrants to be investigating a fellow American
now
illegally.
Now, here's an interesting point that I think you'll appreciate. I think that there is not going to be a political party or a political side who is untouched by this. I think that when this investigation is done, they're going to point to certain Democrats who use this, and they already have, right? The Steele document. They already have. But I think that there's also going to be some Republicans, and again, they already have Papadopoulos. I think both sides...
A guy talking in a bar in Australia, and the other guy that was on last night, Gage or Lage, whatever his name was, he wants to sue for $1 as long as he gets an apology because he knows he's right.
So here's the thing. I think both sides are going to be negatively impacted by this Russian investigation because both sides are guilty of it. Now, here's the issue. Because both sides are guilty of it, this Russian indictment that happened with the troll farm and the fraud, nothing is going to come of it because ultimately that is a huge problem. That, in my opinion, is an act of war. When you're starting to spread propaganda that could overthrow a government, that's potentially an act of war. And nothing is going to come of this because both sides have been using Russia as a means to their own end.
Not the Republicans. They haven't got one stitch of evidence on Trump. Not one. All they got is what Steele, a foreign agent, which he should be indicted.
But that's not true either because there's still things that are classified. We don't know. And you know what? You may be right. But we don't know until the investigation is done.
Well, I think you're missing the whole picture, and most of the people I know in Fall River and around this country, but they're starting to wise up, and it showed in the election.
So what I'll say to you is this. And I appreciate your opinions. I think that they're well thought out. But what I'll say to you is this. What I'll say is I think until all the information is out there and the investigation is complete, we can't say that the Democratic Party isn't involved and we can't say that the Republican Party isn't involved until the investigation is actually complete. What we do know based on the information that's out there right now and the release of information is the Democratic National Committee appeared to be involved, but we also know because of the people who were centered around Donald Trump that the Republican Party potentially was involved, and even Donald Trump may be involved. And I'm using the word may on purpose because the investigation is not done.
I hear what you're saying, but if you go back to the Clinton investigation with Ken Starr, when they finished up, they had at least 11 or 13 impeachable charges. Not one of them flew. They had the evidence. Not one of them went through.
But here's the thing.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you, Rick?
So impeachable charges are based on somebody willing to bring it forward. And that's the thing. Even with the FBI, right? We're experiencing an FBI, the product of an FBI investigation right here in the city of Fall River. But with the FBI, they won't push something unless they actually feel that they can go all the way with it and they have enough solid proof and there's no reasonable doubt that the person could be actually innocent.
Rick, the Ken Starr investigation, at least 11 impeachable documents, the facts right there.
But again, reasonable doubt. So when
reasonable doubt, none.
When an attorney looks at something, or when somebody who's looking to get rid of somebody looks at something, they say, what could be said that can make this document look like it's circumstantial? And a lot of the times when we talk about impeachment, especially when we talk about presidents, especially when we don't necessarily like somebody, or when we don't like a candidate for office, we tend to look at the information as, oh yeah, that's a black mark. But when you actually look at it in the court of law, the question becomes: is this something that could be proven without reasonable doubt?
It wasn't even in the court of law. It went to the Congress and the Senate, and they didn't find with provable evidence, with his own statements, Bill Clinton's own statements, and the person that it happened to, and still nothing happened. And that's what's going to happen here. It's going to be this, and this. Nothing will happen.
But again, you're based on statements, and statements are a he said, she said thing, which could potentially lead to reasonable doubt.
This was evidence, sworn statements.
And you know, I get where you're coming from, because when you look at the information, you ask yourself the question: did this person do something illegal? And if you look at the information on just the face value of the information, you say yes. But the question is
what's more than the president swearing under oath and then after reversing his statement saying it was a lie?
Right.
What's more?
You know what? You know what? Because he didn't actually say it was a lie. He said what the definition of is. So right. I agree with you on that point, that he shouldn't have sworn under oath and then said, I don't know what the definition of it, or it depends on what the definition of is. That's attorney speak. So again, it says to me that when Congress and Senate come together and they look at these documents, and they are the folks who make sure that due process still exists, they have to look at that and say, does this information have, is this going to be able to be pushed forward, or is there some reasonable doubt? So rather than drag it through the entire court process and then nothing happens because there was reasonable doubt, what they do is they throw it out and they say, okay, well, now we're not going to be able to do this because some juries may not be able to say that they agree with it. Does that make sense?
Well, not really, but if that's what you say, that's what you say.
And you know, the best part about at least America, is everybody's entitled to their opinion. I appreciate your opinion, because you and I agree on some points, but then we disagree on others. And I think the disagreement for me is what it actually takes to actually convict somebody. And I'll be honest with you, I truly believe that people are innocent until proven guilty, and you have to kind of put everything into context, and just the documents and the statements on their own as not necessarily context.
Okay, have a good day, Rick.
Thank you so much for your call. Thank you for your opinions, because I know a lot of people actually share the opinions that you have, and I'd argue that you make some very, very good points. And if the information were put before you, I think you would actually go forward and you would say, hey, I am actually going to go through the process of impeachment for Bill Clinton because of all this information that is against him. But it seems that, and this could have been collusion. You could be 100% correct. This could be collusion. This could be the government taking care of themselves. This could be the Democratic Party controlling the media and making sure that nothing actually happens. And that's a possibility. But I think, in my opinion, the bigger possibility and the more likelihood, in my opinion, is that they went through all the information and they said, we can't find anything that is definitive, because every single piece of every statement that we have could potentially have holes shot through it. So first we started off talking about the 13 Russians who were indicted, and they're being indicted for fraud. Now, again, in the United States, we have due process, and they're innocent until proven guilty. But there's multiple examples of these folks actually creating a troll farm and creating things like sex tape between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, which, in case you didn't know, didn't happen. Or maybe it did happen, but at least it didn't happen on videotape. They also did a video of a soldier who was dressed very poorly, shooting the Quran. They also did a video, or they created this group, and they pushed for Texas secession from the United States. And that turned into a conversation of why we believe what we believe. Why is it that on the internet, why, if you're watching Brain Drain on the J&J Jewelers Facebook live cam, are you not only listening to what I'm saying to you, but you should also be looking up and gathering the information that I'm saying and saying, hey, let me look up other stuff and see what opinions I have, and if my opinions are right or wrong, and what facts support my opinion, and what facts support his opinion, but also come to an unbiased conclusion. And I think one of the reasons why this happens is because of the fact that we don't teach kids in schools how to do research anymore. What we do teach them is how to take a test. And it's funny, we're talking a lot about education, we're talking a lot about buildings, but we're not talking about the fundamentals of actual education as a whole and how people should be taught the necessary skill of being able to do research. Just like when I say things like, we should spend more money on education, more than we even come close to spending right now, to extend the learning day, so that way we can teach kids ethics and morals. That way we can teach kids civics, which I was drawing a blank on last time I was talking about this. But also, we should be teaching kids how to do research and critically think, giving them the arts again. We should be extending, and God forbid, we should give them breaks like they do in college. Give them breaks, so that way their mind is able to absorb more information. So, I know I just twisted the conversation again, but really, we're talking about why is it that these Russians were allowed, or not allowed, why did people in the United States believe what these Russians perpetrated? Is it because of our own ignorance? And why are we doing nothing about actually going after Russia? A previous caller said they find it interesting that this information was released on the same day of the school shooting. And really, it makes you ask, why was it released on the same day? Why couldn't it have been released shortly after? I'd say part of it is because people don't want you talking about Russia and how they let this go on, how they were actively involved in meddling in an election. And I get it. The Republicans are saying things like there's no measurement, there's no way that we can measure, or there was, I think the proper verbiage is, there was no measurable impact on the election. But how can you measure the impact on an election from these troll arguments? Because the way that these trolls work is they throw things up against the wall. They throw crap against the wall and they see what sticks. So they just continue lobbing this crap, and then you know what? If 15 people believe one of the pieces of crap and then 20 people believe the other piece of crap, then all this information is out there, and then everybody has multiple reasons on why they don't want to vote for somebody, or why they don't like something, or they don't like someone, or why they want to secede from the Union if they're from Texas. You're live in legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing today?
Good, you?
I'm doing unbelievably well. What's up?
Oh, well, this right-left paradigm thing has got everybody all messed up.
I agree.
That's the problem, and this is being taught in school. Let me read you something from, this is back in 76, I believe. The National Education Association, the Lobby for Education, produced a program for the 1976 bicentennial entitled A Declaration of Independence, Education for a Global Community. On page 6 of this document we find, we are committed to the idea of education for global community. You are invited to help turn the commitment into action in mobilizing world education for development of a world community. That was page 6. And then it goes on to continue. When community educators say that community education takes into consideration the total individual and his total environment, they mean precisely this. The field of community education includes the individual in his total psychophysical structure and his entire ecological climate, with all its ramifications, social, political, economical, cultural, spiritual, etc. It seeks to integrate the individual within himself and within his community until the individual becomes a cosmic soul and the community the world.
All right.
They basically want you to be a world citizen, and, you know, the Constitution is about individual equal rights.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying.
What they're pushing is against the 9th and 10th Amendment. It's totally against the Constitution, and that's why they don't teach the Constitution in school. But they're teaching all of this communist crap.
So, actually, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think when they use the word world community, they're not talking about New World Order. They're talking about taking all the information around the world and coming up with a knowledge base based on worldly information as opposed to living in a box. And there's an issue. And actually, let me finish. Let me finish. So one of the issues that Americans have when they travel abroad is this idea of ugly Americans, because we don't pay attention to what's happening outside in the world around us. So much so that people think that in America, we live in this culture where people can't get hurt. But when you go in other countries and you see people getting shot, especially third world countries, you realize that, the world isn't as safe as you necessarily feel that it is. Or you feel that it necessarily is. I should have said that differently. That being said, I think that it's important for people to be worldly. And I think you feel the same way, but you're wondering if this is potentially a violation of their constitutional rights.
Well, the Constitution is there to protect everybody's rights.
Right. But I don't hear anything.
We don't have any rights. The Constitution protects us from the government.
I agree with that.
The government now is the new God.
And
we have to beg for them to do anything today.
I agree.
It should be the other way around.
And I agree with that, because even if you beg, even if the average person begs for the government to do anything today, legislation is not going to pass. And you know why legislation isn't going to pass? Because the corporations are the people who are actually, or the entities that are actually getting legislation passed. Meanwhile, you, the average person, me, the average person, we're not getting anything done because politicians have no reason to listen to us because we're not making their money for them.
Well, that's because they don't work for us. They work for the corporate United States. And we are allowing that to happen because we don't understand who we are. They turned us into corporate citizens, and we are not corporate citizens. We are flesh and blood that is made by God, and God is the ultimate ruler. So we dictate to the corporations, but we don't understand that anymore. And until we realize that everything is by contract law in this country, basically around the world, everything is done by contract. They always want you to sign a contract, but we do not read the contracts.
So something I always like to say, and I'll let you make your final point afterwards, but a philosophical statement I say on a regular basis is people are not a means to an end, they are the end themselves. So go ahead, make your final point, and then we got to go because we're at the end of the show, so go for it.
People should go listen to a podcast from yesterday, February 20th, on the Power Hour, and listen to that talk show host, Daniel, speak with, I think it was Kelly Smith on sovereignty. And
also, you can catch up on any shows. Thank you so much for your call. You can catch up on any shows of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres by going to the YouTube page. Type in Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. It will bring you to the page, and you can watch every single show that we've had on the air since January, at least. Thank you for another great day. I'll see you tomorrow because we're on every Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.